it just really says what you can do when you're fantastic. So Magali, not to put you on the spot.
Muy buenos días con todos. Good morning to everyone, and thanks for the invitation to speak at this year Fogarty orientation for the launch program about how to get the mentorship you need. Oh, thank you. So 3 weeks ago, I was in Geneva presenting at the World Health Organization about how the Social Innovation in Health Initiative was a catalyst to advance our program called Mamás del Río, or Mothers of the River, which is a program that I founded 8 years ago. Now, in this conference, there were several representatives from countries from all around the world and major funders like the World Bank and UNICEF. And the committee for this conference had to select one social innovation among hundreds of social innovation that exist, and they selected us, Mamás del Río. Now, of course, there were several reasons why they selected our innovation, but I believe that the reason that tipped the balance was the recommendation of my mentor, Dr. Luis Gabriel Cuervo, who believed in me, in my research, and in my capacity to communicate in that setting. So today, we are going to review several things. And as you will see, mentoring can make a tremendous impact in your career. So we're going to start by reviewing the concept of mentoring. Then I will discuss how mentoring was a catalyst in my career and can be a catalyst in yours, so you don't settle for less. Remember that it's similar when you're looking for a partner and your friend tells you not to settle for less. It's similar with your mentor. Then I will provide some recommendations for your upcoming fellowship and what I will consider if I were to be a fellow again. And finally, we're going to talk about the imposter syndrome. So, what is mentoring? A mentor is a person who offers advice, information, and guidance to the mentee who will otherwise grow more slowly. And this process of mentoring involves sponsorship, protection, challenge, and increased exposure and visibility of the mentee in an organization or profession. And as you see, this is a very different approach than coaching or precepting. And it's important for you to have clear the concept of mentoring because it sometimes gets confused with other terms. And also because when you have clear this concept, you will realize that not all the persons that you think are your mentor, in fact, really are. Now I will mention how mentoring was a catalyst in my career. So I studied medicine at Cayetano Heredia Proven University in Lima, Peru, and then I did my master's in public health and my PhD in epidemiology at the University of Washington in Seattle. And from medical school until I was able to get my own grants, I had 3 mentors that provided me with guidance, advice, and support, and helped me to become an independent researcher. Later, I will tell you about the 4th mentor I just discovered the last year. So when I finished medical school, I, of course, wanted to start working, and I was working at my university, and I saw an advertisement at the School of Public Health that was looking for 2 female physicians for a phase 3 trial of the human papillomavirus vaccine. So I went and applied for the job, and Patricia, who is in the picture, and is my mentor, was the principal investigator of the program and the one who did the interview. And when I went to the interview and I saw all the candidates, well, definitely they had far more experience than me, but Patricia, who did the interview, believed in me, and 1 week later, they called me and I got the position. And this position was super important in my career because it opened for me the world of research, and also it allowed me to interact more with her. Later, when talking with her, I explained her that what I wanted to do was to design research projects at the community level, to work on promote health and prevent diseases, but actually I didn't want to work in the hospital. So she told me, Magali, what you want to do is called public health. And so I entered into this wonderful world of public health. And later she recommended me to get a scholarship. Actually, I got a scholarship to do a master's in public health and a PhD at the University of Washington. And that scholarship changed my life and opened for me several doors. You know, for me, it will be impossible, or to my family, to pay and to come to study here in the US. So this was a super important opportunity. And at the University of Washington, I met Dr. Joe Sant, and he was my mentor for my Fogarty Fellowship. During that fellowship, I studied the association between the human papillomavirus and the human T lymphotropic virus in indigenous women from the Peruvian Amazon. And this study opened for me the beautiful world of indigenous health that I have continued until now. Later, I had to write my NIH career grant that at that time was called the GRIP, which stands for Global Research Initiative Program for Foreign Investigators. And Cesar was my mentor, and he guided me through all the process of grant writing. And later, Patty and Joe recommended me for a position as an associate professor at the School of Public Health in Cayetano Heredia, and also as an affiliate associate professor at the Department of Global Health at the University of Washington. So as you see, these three mentors helped me along the way until I was able to get my own grants from institutions like the National Institute of Health, Grand Challenges Canada, the Peruvian Council of Science and Technology, and the Inter-American Development Bank. So remember I told you that last year I discovered that I had a fourth mentor that I have been interacting with for the last 3 years. But just last year, I saw all the signs and realized, and I told him actually, Luis Gabriel, I just realized that you are my mentor. So how did I realize this? I met Luis Gabriel Cuervo, that you are going to see actually on Thursday. We have a presentation on leadership and policy, and I am super excited about that. Luis Gabriel is a senior advisor at the Pan American Health Organization here in Washington, D.C., and he's Colombian actually. And I met him when Mamás del Río received a Social Innovation in Health Award from the Pan American Health Organization. Luis Gabriel has been a huge supporter of our program called Mamás del Río, which aims to improve maternal and newborn health in remote, rural, and indigenous areas of the Peruvian and the Colombian Amazon through the empowerment of community health workers with technology. So Luis Gabriel invited me to do a podcast for Global Health Matters. It's a podcast from TDR, a program that belongs to WHO. I recommend you to hear that podcast. And we were invited for the first season. And the reason why we were invited to talk in this podcast was because of him. Later, he invited me and funded me to present at the Health Systems Research Conference, along with his team, on an important topic that you are going to learn this week, that is global health communication. We also co-author papers in English, in BMJ Innovations about social innovation in health, and in Spanish also, at the Revista Biomédica from the Colombian National Institutes of Health. And she also recommended me to be interviewed by BMJ on how to influence policy through evidence. Also, he funded me and he selected me to be the first innovator to travel to another innovation. So I selected to go to Colombia to visit the Canto del Tucán, or the Song of the Tucán, which is a beautiful social innovation in health in the Colombian Amazon that train indigenous people to be journalists. So I went there and I learned a lot of things about health in another setting with similar challenges to the ones we face in the Peruvian Amazon. So as you see, Luis Gabriel fulfilled all the criteria for an effective mentor. Now, what an effective mentor does. An effective mentor shows commitment to the mentee's success, and places the need of the mentee above any other personal considerations. A mentor demonstrates integrity, honesty, and ethics, which are extremely important characteristics, and also respects the mentee and mentoring relationship, ensuring the confidentiality of all the information that is discussed, acknowledging appropriately the mentee in the project, for example, in terms of co-authorship, and also respecting the time with the mentee. So my recommendation is that if you find a busy mentor that reschedules all the time, think if you want to consider him or her as your mentor. He also should provide emotional support so that the mentee feels free to express all the feelings, concerns, and opinions, and should be an active listener and function as a guide and facilitator rather than a director or dictator. For example, a mentor should use careful questioning to help the mentee come to their own conclusions and should promote critical thinking. Now, a mentor should have knowledge of the institution, the professional field, and the academic culture. And this is the reason why you have one mentor in the US and one mentor in your host country. And information about the academic culture is difficult to obtain from other sources. So rely on your mentor in your host country because he will help you and he will guide you through that system. Also, a mentor is able to provide honest, constructive feedback in a supportive manner along several mentoring activities, like, for example, writing grants, manuscript, do presentations. So if you have to do a presentation in another country, rely on your mentor. He or she should also provide vision to the mentee. For example, in the case I told you about Patricia, she told me, Magali, what you want to do is called public health. So I follow that path. A mentor should also create opportunities for the mentee, for example, to apply for a grant, to a job, or to an award, or write recommendation letters for you. I just got a Fulbright, and the 4 mentors that I mentioned wrote recommendation letters for me. Also, the mentor should advise the mentee on decision making. So this upcoming year, you will have to make several decisions. You can rely on your mentor. Of course, the mentor should provide a sponsorship like office space, lab space, research materials, and possess the knowledge and skills needed to meet the mentee professional needs. In our case, for example, he should know how to write grants and manuscripts. So mentoring can be confused with all of these terms that I want to review briefly. For example, with coaching, which is the provision of a specific skill or to reach a particular goal, or advising, which is usually time limited and focused on a specific domain of professional development, or teaching, which is the provision of knowledge and skills, or tutoring, advocacy, or sponsorship, which is the provision of assets that can include research supplies and equipment. So mentoring can be confused with all of these terms. A mentor ideally should have all of these, but with this, I want to tell you that your tutor or your advisor are not necessarily your mentors. So if you want to review more about mentoring, I recommend you to read this supplement at the American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene, where several of the professors of this consortia are co-authors. So now I want to share some of the lessons I learned from my fellowship. And the first lesson is that different experiences will enrich your life and help you find your path. Now, this upcoming year, you may experience things that you seem are not relevant at the time, but later in life, they can be relevant. For example, one of the requirements to get my scholarship for the Master's in Public Health was to do my thesis on the use of information and communication technologies to prevent diseases. And I have to tell you that I wasn't happy with that topic. I did it. And years later, when I had to design the technology component of Mamás de Río, which is to provide the tablets to the community health workers, that experience that I learned during my master's thesis years ago was super relevant. So enjoy all the experiences that you are going to have this year. The second lesson is to follow your instincts and ask for guidance. It may be that you want to follow a different path than the rest of your colleagues. Your intuition tells you that that is what you want to do. So go ahead and do it and ask advice to your mentors. In my case, I was the only one in my medical school class who wanted to work at the community level. So I met Patricia, and she introduced me to the field of public health. So this is the reason why it's important for you to have clear what do you want to do. The third lesson is that the path to your final goal is not always straight. For example, I started with sexually transmitted infections, then I moved to the use of technology for disease prevention, and now I am working on maternal and newborn health. So every experience will count towards your final goal. The fourth lesson is that your academic life may be influenced by your personal experiences, just like it happens to poets or musicians. In my case, my pregnancy changed my career path. While working on sexually transmitted infections in the Amazon, I became pregnant. And while pregnant in that field, I was able to identify and understand more clearly the enormous gap that exists to access healthcare for women and their families in Amazonian and indigenous rural areas. And actually, experiencing my pregnancies provided me with the passion I needed to pursue harder my goals. And it also, through Mamás de Rio, I have get this sense of transcendence in my research and in my life. Now, the fifth experience is that you will face challenges, find support in your mentors, and you can learn also from your mistakes. And I will tell you what happened to me 12 years ago. 12 years ago, I was super pregnant. It was 8 days before my due date, and I accepted a presentation at the University of Washington. It was a major presentation. So the first lesson, never accept a presentation when you are pregnant. Actually, it was the first presentation I was important that I was going to do in English, which is not my first language. So I started the presentation, and in the second slide, I saw everything dark, and actually I felt an intense fear of wanting to escape the stage. I don't know how I managed to finish the presentation. Of course, I don't think it went well. I never asked, but nobody congratulated me after the presentation, so well, that was a sign. So after this, I developed this intense fear for presenting. I remember I talked about this with my mentor, Cesar, and he told me about a tribe in India that when a person falls from the tree, when they're going to get the coconut, the tribe immediately makes them climb again so he gets cured from the fear. So for me, it was clear that I have to keep trying. So I went into therapy to understand why this happening to me. I thought that the world was ending because, as you know, in research and in everything, speaking public speaking is super important. So on purpose, I accepted a presentation on my second pregnancy at the World Conference of Human Papillomavirus. And the fear has decreased, but was still there. My final graduation was on this presentation when I had to do a TEDx talk in Peru in 2016 without experiencing this fear again. So after the talk was done, I was happy, of course, because it went well, but because I didn't feel this fear. And guess what? Today, I haven't also experienced it. So I am free still. So one of the important things that Dr. Tag said and that relates to me is that you have to learn from your failures, right? And this is an example. And the sixth lesson is that the mentors are not perfect. Of course, they are humans. We tend usually to idealize people, but they can also, they commit mistakes, and we can also learn from their mistakes. For example, I have learned how not to behave in specific circumstances and what not to do. Now, what I will consider if I have to be a fellow again? Well, I will mention three things. First, and of course, this is from my point of view. The first thing is that communication of your research is important, and communication doesn't end with publishing the paper or going to that scientific conference. We need to learn how to communicate to wider audiences. So if you see ResearchGate, and if you see how many people read your papers, probably if you are lucky are 1,000, I don't know, 500. But if you go to the media, for example, millions of people will learn about your research. And this year, I was in the World Conference of Science Journalism. I was invited by Elsevier, and something that struck me was what a journalist from Kenya in our panel said, that influencers now have a more prominent voice than researchers. So we, as researchers, shouldn't lose our space. We need to learn how to communicate, and I know that this week you will have an interesting session on that. The second thing is, to whom will help your research? How did you come up with your research question? Was it based on your scientific curiosity, or was it based on really studying what that community needs and then frame your research question based on that? This happened to me. On my formative fellowship, I based my research question on my scientific curiosity and what wasn't known on the academic spectrum of, in this case, the human papillomavirus and the human T lymphotropic virus. When I went into the field, and I am from Peru, I saw a different reality. People were dying from other things. And that experience helped me to build my next project, Mamás de Río. We are going to discuss more of that on Thursday. The third thing is to think now, before you go into the field, what will happen after your research ends? Will someone continue your work? How about sustainability? How are you going to transfer the knowledge to the community? Finally, I want to talk about an important topic, which is the imposter syndrome. And it's important to talk about this because many of us have had it. I had it. So what is this? It's when an individual doubts about their skills, talents, or accomplishments, and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. And people with this syndrome think that the accomplishment they had is because they are lucky and not because they deserve it, and that soon people will find out about that. It's very common. 70% of people have experienced it at some time. It's more frequent among women. And it's this feeling that you are like a fraud. And people also with the imposter syndrome don't like to accept compliments. It's highly associated with perfectionism. So who in this room is not a perfectionist? And also it can lead to depression, distress, and burnout. Now, how you can overcome the imposter syndrome? You can learn how to celebrate your wins. For example, give yourself credit when you complete your IRB application, when you got that first job, when you submit an abstract. Also, create a support team, and you are going to have a session about that this week. You can form a group of peers and mentors who will empower and encourage you. And also you have to learn how to talk back to your negative thoughts. Remember when I told you about the panic attack I had when doing the presentation? I had a lot of negative thoughts before starting the presentation. I had a lot of negative thoughts of what bad can happen to me, and that happened to me. So you have to learn, and we have to learn how to silence those negative thoughts that are super common. Every time you have a challenging event in your life, you will have negative thoughts. And also, the practice of mindfulness is very important. And finally, I want to give you the most important recommendation for the next year, and it's to enjoy your life. Life is short, and life is not only work. So this is my contact information, and thank you very much for your attention. So I guess there are time for questions.
Hello, Maria. My name is Charles Martin Dickens from Ghana, and I have a very short question. I see you've had a lot of mentors. They've opened many doors for you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, not very well.
Okay. I just wanted to ask a simple question. I said, you've had a lot of mentors and they've opened many doors for you. You've had many opportunities through them. What do you feel they gained by mentoring you?
I think they gain a lot.
Care to share?
No, it's a joke. When talking with my mentors, they always tell me that it's a bi-directional relationship. It's not that they only support you. They will support you if you behave well, if you do well things, if you're responsible, of course. If you're not those things, then they will move probably to the next person. But I think they, for example, in the work we do, so if you have a good mentee, and I can tell you that from my perspective, you can rely on the things he's doing, for example, in accomplishing the work, doing very good field work. I have had very good students, for example. I have one now from the University of Arizona who is super good at understanding indigenous health, for example. And I know that she will produce knowledge based on the work that we do. I mean, she will go to presentations. It's like it's like your son. When he grows up, you also, he also has a lot of accomplishment that belongs to you. So I will say in our world, in field work, publication of papers, going to conference, talking nice about you when doing a mentoring session, for example, about Joe, and many things. But you have to be responsible. Of course, everything starts with D. You have to answer all the time, be responsible, and be a nice person also.
Hi. Sorry, before I ask my question, I just want to make a comment. It's really cold in here.
I know.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of tropical people here.
Me too. I didn't bring the jacket because I saw the temperature in
Yeah.
DC, but now it feels like in the Andean region.
So I hope in the next sessions that's taken into consideration. I think it's a question that's very important related to the first question that you've mentioned. And I just want to hear a bit from you about, you know, it's and I think this is important for all of us here who are looking at being mentored. It's not too early to start being a mentor as well. Okay, so to have mentees. Okay, and having mentees actually makes you a better mentee as well, right? So if you know the sorts of things that your mentees aren't doing well, it makes you a better mentee to your mentors, etc. So maybe if we can just hear a bit from you about that, because we're all looking ahead at our mentors. Can you give us a few things to think about in terms of, because even as we are here, there are a lot of people looking up to us and for us as potential mentors. And so we're all on a journey towards being potential mentors. Can you speak a bit more about that, about the things that we can do right now to even start developing mentees? Thank you.
Great. So it's important for you to recognize the characteristics of an effective mentor, because it will help you also when you become a mentor yourself. And I think, Jess, I agree with you that it's not too early to start. You can start from now when you, for example, go to your host countries or return to your country, to give time to people, for example, recognize that individual who can help you and that you can help advance their career path, that you can teach them. We don't know everything, right? So, but we still can teach people certain things where we're specialists. So I think I agree with you. You can start like now, and it will help you become also a better person, to establish that relationship, give time to people, show empathy, show respect for their time, do what you want other people to do with you. It's very important.
Hi, my name is Vina. I'm one of the Fulbright Fogarty Scholars. I'm currently a medical student. I really enjoyed your talk. I think mentorship is something I've struggled with. And it's been nice to hear about all the wonderful mentorship relationships everyone through this program has had in the years past, but I'm curious about when those relationships have not worked out. How do you, as a trainee, someone so early on, how do you know when this is not going to turn into a successful mentorship relationship? How do you know when someone's just an advisor versus everyone that we work with is busy, that you're not always their number one priority? How do you know how to parse that out? And I enjoyed seeing your timeline where you said the first kind of one of these big four mentors that you've had was after your first job as a physician. So how did seeking out those relationships work before that and after that?
Yeah, well, I didn't know about mentoring until some years ago, thanks to the Fogarty Fellowship. I wasn't aware about that concept. Not even in my university, we'll talk about that. So it's important, for example, and you can realize, for example, I just realized, having worked for several years on this, that I have this new mentor after I identify the signs, no? And I think a mentor is not the person who just cares about that you publish that research, no? And that you are co-author and that's it, and he forgets about you. That is not a mentor. A mentor is a person who cares for you and cares that you advance in your career, no? So he looks farther and overall. So I think that can be a good example. So when people only focuses, or colleagues with whom you work focus only on that you publish that paper or that you finish that recruitment and that's it, probably they are not your mentors. And yes, I had those experiences and I never worked again with them besides that paper, for example.
Wow. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm Gladys Guafong from Cameroon, a fellowship of the NPGH program. Your presentation is so wonderful. You've had a great relationship with your mentors and about 4 mentors. So my question is, are all these 4 mentors in the same profession or do they from different profession? Did you actually know them for a very long time? Did you work with them before getting to have them as mentors? How did you really build a relationship, and how did they get that interested in you? Because it's really a great experience, and I know in the part of the country I'm coming, this issue of mentorship is really a new concept, new ideas, and many of the mentors may not even really know what their roles and responsibilities are. And some of them are not exposed to training like this. So how do we go about that? Another issue I see is that when you get into the research community, you get to find a lot of people who are of medical background, and somebody like myself, who is a nurse, you really do not have so many people that have traveled the path to hold your hand. So how do we do it? Thank you.
Yeah, so your question was about if I had mentors from different fields, right? Well, my 4 mentors are medical doctors, so are kind of in the same field, but they work on different topics. And the reason why now I am working more with my 4 mentor, even though he is not from Peru, is because we share a topic in common, social innovation in health. So you probably will change more the interactions or the intensity with your mentors if, of course, they are working on a similar path, and life changes and you change your priorities. So when I was working with sexually transmitted infections, I work more with Joe, Patricia, Cesar. But now that I moved to social innovation in health and we do research on that, I work more with Dr. Luis Gabriel Cuervo. And I know that mentoring in our countries, I mean, is tough because our institutions don't recognize it. I mean, in Cayetano, I can say that we have done a very good job on that, but not in all institutions, mentoring is institutionalized. So I think also it's very key to promote that institutionalization, and the NIH has made an effort to that. And one of the things that I also want to mention that it's important that you have more than one mentor, because you can learn different things from each of them. For example, from Patty, I learned how to communicate, how to do presentation, how to do negotiations. And I also learned how to handle stress under extremely difficult circumstances. She was, I remember, the Minister of Health. And I was entering into the ministry, and there were a lot of people shouting and carrying a coffin with her name of it. And they were yelling that they want her dead. So I thought, how can someone work under these circumstances? And actually, when I talked with her, she explained me that she had to adjust their way of thinking so that things don't affect us. From Joe, I also learned many things, like he's a super nice person. He is very kind. He's super empathetic, and he works and collaborates with equity a lot. And he, by the way, writes very well in English. No wonder. And from Cesar, I learned how to give time to people, for example, how to balance life and family. I remember, of course, through all this process and through all the years, I got pregnant, I delivered my babies, and Cesar helped me a lot with the breastfeeding part of my life, how to breastfeed my baby, how to take care of them. She was actually like a mother to me. And, you know, from mentors, you learn different things, and that is the reason why it's important to have more than one mentor, because one mentor cannot fulfill all your needs. And also it's important to have mentors that complement each other.
Hello, I'm Camille Mba from Cameroon. So my question is very similar to, I think, just to follow up on what we were talking about. So when you have many mentors, so in two phases, maybe two angles. So what if your mentors don't get along in terms of the objectives, and also in terms of just not having a good relationship? So for example, I'm a physician. I do have three mentors. One is pure clinician. I have an epidemiologist, and I have a fundamentalist. My epidemiologist mentor has totally different views from the fundamentalist. Like, whenever I try to bring an idea or something from the fundamentalist, it's like, it's basic sense. It's like, I mean, what are you doing with that again? So in terms of objectives, like, I think they don't align, and I sometimes struggle to keep this relationship. It's like I have to drop once to get ahead. And also sometimes you just have people who don't get along for one reason or the other. So how would you go ahead with that? Thank you.
Sure. So just don't put the mentors that don't get along in the same room at the same time. Really. My mentors get along, I think. Actually, Patty and Cesar, they are husband and wife, so they should get along. But when I had this experience of, for example, and this happened to me, I did a presentation, and one of the persons who was presenting with me and one of my colleagues, he doesn't get along well with people in general. No? He's very smart, a very good epidemiologist, but let's say that he doesn't get along with many people. So what I do is, you have to separate things, and if you get into a time where it's difficult to work, you have to choose. That is what you have to do. Yeah. So I don't know if Joe, you want to add anything else to the answers I provided?
Hey, sorry, I'm Gamma with Global. I've just got one more question. There are some structured mentorship programs and other situations are less structured. You know, what's your suggestion in terms of which works better? You know, to have something structured or
Mhm.
unstructured?
So for this Fogarty, you will have your mentorship compact, and it has several interesting things like the times you're going to meet, what is your objective. I didn't enter into the details here because of the time, but I would suggest you that for this year, use that compact. It's very useful. I mean, the times I have seen him, it gives you a structure so that your mentor, for example, who is busy knows that he has a meeting with you. And also, you know, in which field you want him or her to mentor you. So use the structure, but later in life, of course, for me, it works now the unstructured mentorship. Thank you.